Day 9 after the grid goes down. In Los Angeles, National Guard troops fire on looters outside a pharmacy. In Chicago, families burn furniture in apartment courtyards because the gas failed on day 3. In Phoenix, people die of dehydration in their own living rooms, staring at empty taps while they wait for trucks that will never come. But in a small town in northern Idaho, a 67-year-old man sits on his porch at dawn, slowly drinking coffee from a percolator that has been heating on his wood stove since 5:30. The power has been out for 9 days for him too. He simply doesn't care. This isn't prepper fantasy about bunkers and bullets. This is about 7 real American towns that still possess something most of the country threw away decades ago: the ability to feed themselves, protect themselves, and govern themselves when every system collapses. 3 things decide whether a town survives or becomes a mass grave behind a faded population sign. Population size in the sweet spot, small enough that people know each other's real skills and character, large enough to keep welders, nurses, mechanics, and seed savers close. Real local food production that doesn't depend on just-in-time diesel or imported fertilizer. And community cooperation that has already been stress-tested by hardship, not just discussed at a potluck. Keep those 3 in mind. Now let me show you where they exist and exactly where they fail. Start in Sandpoint, Idaho, population 9,000, where the Selkirk Mountains plunge into Lake Pend a lake so deep the Navy once tested submarine holes in it. Winters here are enemies you fight early. Ice storms kill power almost every year, yet the response is automatic. Wood stoves roar, neighbors check on the elderly, cast iron pans come out. These people can their own food because snow has cut the highway before. They heat with wood because the forest is outside town. They fix their own trucks because the dealership is an hour away on roads that vanish under snow. Diversified ranches and vegetable farms feed the town directly. The lake supplies near limitless water and self-replenishing fish. 9,000 residents deliver skill diversity without losing the ability to make fast decisions at town meetings where reputation still matters. But the fracture has nothing to do with weather. It's already visible in the quiet resentment of a third-generation logger who has stockpiled diesel and knows how to keep community generators alive. He looks up the hill at a new $3 million lakefront mansion bought last year by a California tech refugee. That newcomer has money, solar panels he cannot repair, and the casual assumption that we're all neighbors now means locals will share fuel. Except the logger's own daughter was priced out and moved 2 hours south. When diesel grows scarce and the mansion's generator starts burning the town's last reserves, polite resentment turns ugly. Roadblocks appear on private drives, whispers spread that the newcomers can solve their own problems with all that money. Except money buys nothing when trust was never earned. Social cohesion, the invisible infrastructure everything else depends on, is being hollowed out. Without it, Sandpoint stops being one town. It becomes 2 groups eyeing each other's resources, wondering who will move first. That quiet class war is ugly, but it is nothing compared to what water can do to neighbors who once shared tractors. Drive southwest into Colorado's North Fork Valley, to Paonia, population 1,500. Here, resilience runs on agricultural mastery. Orchards heavy with apples, pears, cherries, and peaches grow in soil most farmers would call a gift. Vegetable operations practice true crop rotation, seed saving, and companion planting, the fundamentals that matter when catalogs stop arriving. Grass-fed cattle, goat dairies, and vineyards turn sunlight into calories and community. Harvest crews rotate between farms. Equipment sharing is formalized. A local food hub bypasses national supply chains entirely. 1,500 people is nearly ideal, small enough for real consensus, large enough to cover every critical skill. Paonia could feed itself and surrounding towns, until the water stops. The North Fork of the Gunnison makes the miracle possible. Without irrigation, orchards die, crops fail, cattle starve. Every drop is already claimed by legal rights held by downstream farmers in Hotchkiss and Setteridge, who also have children to feed. Colorado water law is zero-sum even with courts. When law disappears, only force remains. Picture 2 men who shared equipment last harvest now standing armed on opposite sides of an irrigation ditch at first light. One remembers helping the other fix a tractor axle. The other remembers lending his truck when his neighbor's broke down. Those memories collapse the moment both watch their crops wilt and their kids go hungry. Cooperation dies when you must choose between your family's calories and a stranger's organic peaches. Paonia has the soil and knowledge to feed thousands, but keeping the water may require pointing rifles at people who used to be friends. The very abundance that makes the town valuable also paints a target on it. Now consider what happens when competence meets something the wilderness cannot fix. Head northeast to Ely, Minnesota, population 3,400, perched on the edge of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. Millions of acres of roadless forest and thousands of lakes stretch north unbroken into Canada. People here navigate by map and compass, repair their own snowmobiles because the parts store is 100 miles away, and hunt, fish, and trap as routine protein sources. Volunteer fire crews and search and rescue teams regularly risk their lives in blizzards because that is simply the deal. The wilderness offers staggering protein. Deer, moose, bear, grouse, walleye, pike, lake trout. Locals already smoke fish, can venison, and dry meat without electricity. 3,400 people harvesting from millions of acres is sustainable if managed with basic care. Social cohesion is forged daily by the environment itself. Then your 12-year-old daughter wakes screaming with pain that sharpens when you press her lower right side. Burst appendix. In normal times, she is helicoptered to Duluth. In crisis, with no aviation fuel and grounded flights, she dies over 3 agonizing days from peritonitis while you can only hold her hand. Heart attacks and childbirth complications become death sentences. And when it's 30 below for weeks, heating is measured in hours of survival. Ely runs on oil, propane, and electricity. The forest has unlimited wood, but retrofitting an entire town in January means chainsaws scream through the dark at -30, while children huddle under every blanket, smoke curling from chimneys that have not been used in decades, and parents frantically learn skills they should have practiced years ago. All the fish and all the neighborly trust cannot save a child whose appendix bursts or a family that freezes because they never converted their furnace in time. At least Illy's dangers are honest, isolation and cold. Cross the country to Astoria, Oregon, at the mouth of the Columbia River, population 10,000, and you meet a town where the lifeline and the death sentence wear the same face. This is a working waterfront. Commercial boats still unload salmon, tuna, crab, and bottom fish. Processing plants turn catch into food on site. Navigation, marine mechanics, net repair, and fish handling remain living trades. The Columbia is one of the world's most productive salmon rivers, and Astoria sits at the perfect confluence of river and ocean. In a national supply chain collapse, the town could sustain calories through fishing when landlocked places cannot. Interdependent boat crews, dock workers, and net shops create cooperation that extends beyond economics. Rainfall provides fresh water, mild winters reduce heating needs, and the maritime climate supports year-round gardens. The fracture is binary and catastrophic. Astoria lies in its tsunami inundation zone. The Cascadia subduction zone offshore is well past its historical average for a megathrust quake that would send a wave ashore in 20 to 30 minutes. The waterfront that supplies protein, docks, plants, fuel tanks, and boats sits at sea level and would be erased, not damaged, but obliterated by water moving 40 miles an hour carrying vessels, buildings, and old-growth logs like battering rams. Even without the big one, rising seas and stronger storms slowly strangle the same port infrastructure the town needs. The geography that feeds Astoria is the geography that can kill it in a single afternoon. No amount of cooperation or knowledge changes that timeline. It is only a question of when luck runs out. What happens when infrastructure looks local but depends on distant systems and knowledge fails to translate into survival? Consider Moscow, Idaho, population 25,000 in the rolling Palouse Hills. The University of Idaho brings libraries, labs, machine shops, and agricultural research. The surrounding land grows some of the world's most productive dryland wheat. The Moscow Food Co-op, thriving farmers markets, CSAs, and local processors create real food infrastructure. Yet 6 months into collapse, a tense community meeting reveals the fracture. A wheat farmer who has worked these hills his whole life listens while an academic outlines calorie per acre plans that still assume hybrid seed, diesel tractors, and fertilizer from overseas supply chains. The farmer knows those inputs are gone forever. The knowledge of how to grow food at human scale with saved seed and hand tools was lost here 2 generations ago. The university adds thousands of extra mouths, many students with no local roots, and parents who may arrive demanding protection. Spokane refugees could head this way once they learn Moscow has milling capacity. The very specialization that made the town prosperous in normal times becomes lethal dependency when the complex systems supporting it vanish. Some fractures cut even deeper. Inequality so sharp it prevents the very cooperation resilience requires. In Taos, New Mexico, population 6,000 at 7,000 feet in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, an off-grid culture has existed for decades. Earthships harvest their own power, water, and waste. Hundreds of residents already live without utilities because they chose autonomy long ago. Layered over this are Hispanic families using centuries-old acequia irrigation, traditional dryland crops, and the Taos Pueblo's continuous indigenous knowledge. When these groups cooperate, the redundancy of skills is formidable. But picture the first hard snowstorm of collapsed winter. A family in an uninsulated trailer with an empty propane tank walks through drifting snow to the nearest earthship. A $40,000 showcase with solar, rocket mass heater, and 6 months of stores. They knock. They beg for firewood so their children do not freeze. The owner, who could afford resilience the trailer family never could, must decide whether to share what he prepared or turn them away while listening to kids cry a quarter mile from his warm home. That choice repeats across Taos along economic and ethnic lines already strained. Off-grid knowledge exists, but is concentrated among those who could buy it. Resentment turns mutual aid into armed camps. When a town stops being one community, none of its advantages matter. Finally, Montpelier, Vermont, smallest state capital, 8,000 residents. State government infrastructure, emergency coordination expertise, and Vermont's serious policy-level investment in local food systems give it real advantages. Preserved farmland, CSAs, dairies, maple operations, and cold climate growing treated as infrastructure, not hobby. Educated, civically engaged residents maintain high trust and functioning town meetings. Yet the town sits in a narrow valley with limited roads vulnerable to flooding. In 2011, Tropical Storm Irene cut Montpelier off for days. Roads washed out, bridges failed. The town was alone until power returned and help arrived. Now, imagine the same flood but permanent. No heavy equipment to rebuild because fuel and parts are gone. Isolation stretching from days into months. Winter arriving with no outside supply. Limited medical capacity, almost no manufacturing, and heating fuel that becomes life or death from November to March. Firewood exists in theory, but the town-wide conversion to wood heat in crisis reveals gaps in knowledge, equipment, and seasoning storage that Vermonters rarely admit. Better prepared than most is not the same as safe when you're cut off for an entire January with no way to bring in what you lack. These 7 towns are not fantasies or guaranteed refuges. Sandpoint risks class fracture. Paonia risks water war. Ely risks medical collapse and freezing. Astoria risks sudden erasure by the sea. Moscow risks industrial dependency. Taos risks division along lines of money and ethnicity. Montpelier risks fatal isolation. Yet, all possess foundations most of America abandoned. Realistic population size, genuine local food systems, and cooperation already tested by hardship. The real lesson is that every strength casts a shadow. Remoteness protects but isolates. Water sustains but drowns. Coastlines feed but destroy. Infrastructure processes but depends. Wealth builds but divides. Most of America assumes perpetual supply, order, and external help. On day 9, after the grid collapses, most will burn furniture and wait for rescue that never comes. These towns have at least a chance to be different, the kind of place where someone still sits on a porch drinking coffee because the wood stove doesn't care that the power is out. The only question that matters is this: when the grid goes down on day 9, whose porch will you be sitting on? And will your neighbors trust you enough to share their coffee? Or will they have already decided you're the outsider who can solve your own problems? Geography, food, and skills matter, but when systems fail, survival ultimately depends on whether the people around you believe your life is worth their limited resources. That cannot be bought at the last minute. It's earned slowly, long before the first outage. These towns might make it. Whether you would is a different question, and one you'd better answer while there is still time.